but we can get into it.
Yeah, let's roll. Really appreciate everyone's patience. Thanks, PTM and Mistaken President for hopping up. Excited to follow along and see what you build with this massive IP empire underway. And really excited for our special guests who've been super patient. Got up bright and early on the West Coast and joined us. I don't know if this is the first coffee, so I will. Maybe I should apologize for the nonsense, but we appreciate you bearing with us. Appreciate the patience, and we genuinely are really excited to talk Roofstock on chain. GM.
GM, guys, GM. Yeah, thanks for having us. Wouldn't miss it. Great conversation so far. And, it's not every day that I hear the words mega fucking mutant sandcastle at 6 a.m. So this is the right way to start the day.
Yeah, GM, Captain, and Steve, thanks for having us. Really enjoying the conversation so far.
GM. Can I ask, do you mind before we jump into Roofstock, do you mind sharing a little bit about your backgrounds and maybe how you found your way into Web3? I see not only the head of Web3 initiatives at Roofstock, Sanjay here, I'm referring to, but also an advisor at Pudgy Penguins. Impressive background. Do you mind kind of sharing a little bit about the journey and how you got here?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So, I've been at Roofstock for about 3 years now, just over 3 years. Prop tech company, solid in the Web2 space. You had mentioned in your introduction, it's beginning of the year, we closed our Series E at 1.9 billion valuation. So it's a unicorn, very well respected in the space. I'd say just over a year back, the board asked our leadership to essentially see if there was any thing we could do with Web3. And, it's great that innovation is sort of in the genes of in the DNA of the company. And they picked Jeff and I because we'd been working on other innovative products, and we were both very crypto and Web3 forward and had been nagging the company to do something in that direction anyway. So we both got selected to go and do some research while we were still doing our day jobs. Jeff is a lawyer by trade. He was the GC at the company at the time, and I was leading a REIT initiative for the company. And we spent like 6 months looking through the entire space, and the more we looked into it, the more we got fascinated. And at the beginning, sort of end of last year, beginning of this year, we made the transition full time into leading a completely autonomous Web3 division. And boy, having tasted that, I don't think I can ever go back to Web2. So that was sort of the start of the journey. And then Jeff and I got accepted into the Wharton School's Web3 accelerator. And, that was, that really one thing led to another. And then we just got deeper and deeper into the space and really just wanted to create something fascinating in the real estate industry, but using Web3 technologies. The way I got into Pudgy was at the accelerator. We met Lorenzo, who's the CTO of the new management team. For those of you who might not know, Pudgy, sort of the community was not feeling great about the direction in which the original founders were taking the project. And so there was sort of a community-led buyout that happened, and Luca and Lorenzo and a few others sort of got together and they took over the project. And since then, they've been working on a lot of interesting things to really kind of bring Pudgy back as, their goal is to make it a blue chip. I think it's kind of at the lower end of the blue chips now, even though, the floor is nothing like apes or punks, but they are working really hard to kind of get it to that level.
Yeah, we love Luca. We're big fans of Luca. He's popped into the show before. He's come up to talk. Why don't you get to Jeff to hear your background as well and how you got into Web3, and then I think we want to dissect what you're building here.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Sanjay said, I am a lawyer, for better or worse, have been for a long time. And it was around the ICO boom that being in the Bay Area, a lot of my developer friends started talking about these things. And, they either wanted to buy or they wanted to do their own. And I was like, hey, I don't know anything about the technology, but what you're doing kind of sounds like you might want to have some legal oversight. They're like, hey, don't worry, man. This is just it's a coin. It's not a security, so you don't need to worry about it. And then at that moment, I was like, hey, I can help you guys. I don't know anything about the technology, but I can help you guys. So I've been a legal advisor to a bunch of different projects since then, kind of on the side. And as Sanjay said, it's, the transition to Web3 it's a one-way ticket. I don't have any plans to go back. I don't think I know anyone who's been red pilled and come back. So we were, given this opportunity to develop the Web3 business at Roofstock. And this whole year, basically, we've been working on bringing this project to market, which just came up a few weeks ago. And that was really our chance to prove that we could add something to the space and prove that there is a new way of a new utility for the smart contract NFT infrastructure. In this case, it's transferring ownership of real property. So, this is kind of just the beginning. A lot of big plans going forward, but the first step was just proving the business case.
Yeah, that's awesome. And first of all, I just want to say Jeff is a lawyer, so you all can't hold me accountable for anything I say. That's attorney-client privilege. I'm sending 0.00001 ETH to Jeff so that he is my counsel, and that way nobody can hold me accountable for what I say today. So it's really interesting. I love what you said. Sort of it's a one-way sort of a one-way ticket, and how you got into Web3 and what you could add to the space. Before we even get into the actual business model and what you're doing, one thing I do want to say, when that house sold and the headlines were coming and everything was coming through, was that like this celebratory moment? Like, what was that like for y'all when that happened? Was that like a big, one of your big milestone wins, or how'd that go for you?
We didn't see this coming. That experience was a one-click purchase, just as any NFT is, using smart contracts. We also had financing involved. So there was a moment when we had, a bunch of different people on a Zoom call working out kind of the machinations of the financing side of things. And some of that was done on Matic. And then there were some, currency conversions, and it had to get money, moved back and forth. But at the end of the day, it was just a simple one click. And then that was a Friday, and we had a press embargo until Tuesday. We really didn't think anyone was going to notice. And then within 24 hours, I think the sale appeared at the top of some NFT charts as
it was NFT stats.
Yeah. And then it just took on a life of its own. And that was the most gratifying part of all of this, to see that the community really liked it. There was really not any marketing push from us. And suddenly people were making YouTube videos and tweet threads and, lots of interaction on social. So that was the magic moment, 2 or 3 days after, when this really took on its own life. And we saw, okay, this matters to people. It's not just something we've been toiling away for 10 months in a cave. People actually care.
And actually,
it took over our show.
Oh no, I was going to add the Milk Road picked it up as well, and they featured it on their newsletter. And after that, it just went totally viral on CT, and just loved the enthusiasm from the Web3 community. And I was actually on a plane heading to New York, and I just started noticing all the tweets coming up. And basically, Jeff and I spent like the next 2 or 3 days just being on CT and responding to questions and comments. This is, a very new thing, and it's sort of, for better or worse, while a lot of people appreciated it, a lot of people also had questions about how this worked and what the structure was, and how did the platform work with in conjunction with the financing and this and that. So we spent a lot of time just answering all the questions. But it certainly, those 3 or 4 days where that's all we were doing, it felt like we had sort of arrived. That was certainly the moment, the cutoff point, where it was just, as opposed to Jeff and I and a small team working away at a concept, to where we felt like, okay, now we're really part of the Web3 community.
It's funny because you're like, I love the famous last words of, we didn't think anybody would notice, because you have like this Web3 world where these, we are crazy motherfuckers here in Web3, where people find, Kevin Rose applied for a patent for ravens, and people found it and were talking about it. It's like, they're going to find this home sale on OpenSea. So it's funny. It's funny you said that, the sort of famous last words of, we hope nobody would find it. But so how could you dig in on how that did work? So like, you were answering a lot of those questions. I think a lot of people are wondering the same things. How does it work with financing? What does the process look like? It's hilarious because we always say, like, you're buying an NFT, that's like buying a house, and somebody literally bought a house. So what does that look like? Like, what from a process perspective?
Yeah.
Add to that too, the USDC Homes. Is that a subsidiary of Roofstock, or is that
No,
a third party vendor?
So that's Teller Finance's product for financing, and yeah, I'm happy to go into the details of that as well. But for us, the way this all works is we take a single family rental property and we title it in a Wyoming LLC, and then what's sold as an NFT is really an association of the ownership of that LLC, right? And that's what allows us to sell and settle instantly on an NFT marketplace, because when somebody buys that NFT, it's an instruction to the LLC that, hey, your ownership has changed now from person A to person B. There's no, the real estate title is still sitting in the same LLC. That's not changing. And so that allows us to really have this one-click purchase process, right? What we want to do was bring down the closing time it takes for a rental property, which is the same as any other owner-occupied single-family home, 3 to 4 weeks, with a lot of contingencies and the buyer and seller stressing out over what's going to happen in those 3 or 4 weeks. We wanted a lot of that diligence to happen up front, so the buyer knew exactly what they were going to be buying. And once they knew that and they pressed the button to buy it, then it was an instantaneous transfer, right? So that was the goal. And using ERC 721s, we achieved it. The piece where financing became really interesting, Jeff and I were at Converge, and we were at a DeFi real world asset panel, and then walked up to the CEO of Teller Finance and said, like, you've been talking about real estate as a use case throughout this panel, and we'd like to talk to you more. And they were like, yeah, we have this product called USDC Homes that's built to do financing for a product like yours, and we've just been waiting for somebody like you to come along with a tokenized rental property product. And so we had our product ready to go, they had theirs, and within a couple of weeks we were able to come up with a collab where they funded this first property at a 65% loan to value ratio. What was really interesting about it is, if you guys are watching the regular TradFi market right now, interest rates are already north of 7% for traditional conventional mortgages, and the Fed hasn't stopped increasing interest rates. I think they're going to aggressively follow through in November as well. And so while mortgage rates are going up to levels where if you're buying a rental property, you're buying it today with negative leverage, through DeFi and basically Web3, we were able to bring in financing at a much cheaper cost of capital and more flexible terms. So we think this is the start of something magical where more and more real world assets will start coming into Web3 now that we've proven that it can be done with financing in place. And we're going to make our own products a lot better as well. But we also encourage other kind of people who might have been sitting with interesting projects and looking at Web3. This is the time to come in, because all the tooling and infrastructure is now available to make this a reality.
And this is one of those things. Like, I want to put a pin in a couple things here that people, for people to kind of note. Like, number one, we have conversations on this show all the time about the picks and shovels. And for people who aren't familiar with that analogy, essentially, there's two types of people in the gold rush. You can get in a wagon, you can, try to fly across the country and dig for gold. And, and that's what idiots like me are doing when I'm buying, like, overpriced JPEGs and watching them
chasing
from it.
That asymmetric upside. Yeah.
Yeah. We're searching for the gold. This is picks and shovels. This is one of those sort of under the radar things that is going to fundamentally change how this world operates and actually disrupts how it is. And the other example that we've used is it's like cars. Like, we've talked about similarly buying cars. You buy a car, imagine buying a car where you can see, I'm the worst car buyer. I get taken advantage of every time. I always say, like, they tell me I need like the special unicorn wheels. I buy the unicorn wheels because I'm like, I definitely need them. The car salesman says so. And instead you can see the highest price, the lowest price, the comps. They could build in the contract, the delivery. You could have a car come on like Amazon. That sort of stuff is potentially game changing, and this is doing that with houses. So, I guess a follow up question to what you're working on. Obviously, this one went on OpenSea, one click, all that. Are you building out your own? You're going to build out your own platform, right? Where this is going to be able to do, right? Where it's has everything involved, or can you talk about that? I'm curious.
Yeah, no. So
Yeah,
we
we
actually
do.
partnered. Go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah. We do have our own native marketplace right now. We've partnered with Origin Protocol, and they provide the tech on that. So this was actually transacted there. It was picked up on OpenSea because it was through the Seaport smart contract structure, and it had been listed for on OpenSea as well, and LooksRare and a few others. So yeah, we do have that native marketplace in place. I think one of the advantages, though, that we're offering here as part of this new way to buy and sell a property is you can get a lot of different eyeballs. You know, if you want to market your property through the MLS, the traditional way, you know what that looks like. You know who's involved. You're going to have an agent. You're going to have MLS listings and Zillow and all of that. Now you can actually access the whole OpenSea and LooksRare and NFT crowd as well. We'll see how that plays out. We've talked to the people at OpenSea, the founders and some of the team over there. They're very excited about it. And, you know, they want to see the NFT technology expand. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they want to see themselves as a neutral marketplace for any type of asset, not just the PFPs and that kind of thing. So we kind of want this to be an open ecosystem. We don't, even though we do have our own marketplace, we want this to be kind of out there in the wild. It's not supposed to be a walled garden. It's not supposed to be a Hotel California. You know, you buy it through us and then you have to stay with us forever. Come into our system, leave our system, do what you want. It's your property. We just have a lot of different channels, distribution channels. And then I'll just pick up on the point you said about the picks and shovels. I think, you know, because of my background in legal and Sanjay's in financial structuring, we did spend a lot of time doing that really, let's call it boring stuff that people don't really want to spend a lot of time thinking about or aren't necessarily equipped to. Like, how do you write an LLC agreement so that it is attached to a smart contract? And how do you figure out, you know, how do you build the inspection into the process? All of these real world components about the underlying home still have to be respected. There's still title on the property and there still has to be insurance and you still have to make sure that people pay their taxes. How do you do all of that and still put it into the smart contract experience? And that stuff, you know, that was really like a year of working with lawyers and accountants. That wasn't like the fun technology stuff. All of that came after, once we had mapped out the structure, then we could start getting into the technology. And then, you know, the final part of it is just putting an illustration on. But that's really just the fun part. The hard structuring is where we spend all of our time. And so we hope that this is something that other people will use for their own projects. It's a structure. Our documents are available. We'll make annotated versions available for people that want to copy this and try to apply it to, it could be different real estate assets. It could be different real world assets. There's some new concepts that are coming out here that we really want to propagate in the community. We want people, you know, kind of take it and fork it and do their own thing and build out this space independent of us.
Yeah, I wanted to echo something that Jeff was just talking about. So for, you know, Jeff and I have been working together for 3 years at Roofstock on other projects first, and then the last year and a half on Web3 stuff. And that's a really powerful combination. If people want to do these types of non-PFP type projects, you know, make sure, you know, the founding team has strong legal background, and, you know, it helps to have finance and product and ops. That's sort of where I come from. But that was a really powerful thing that allowed us to, because when Jeff talked about these 10 months that we spent, there wasn't a week where we, you know, came to a dead end and just, you know, felt completely crushed and deflated. And then was trying to find a way around it. And then, you know, and the next week we're back in action trying to, you know, forge this new path. So it took a lot of trial and error to get to this place. I mean, the way I like to put it is we worked really hard for 10 months to make it really simple and easy to buy a property with one click on an NFT marketplace. So certainly echoing Jeff's point here, Our form documents are all available on our website. The smart contract is reasonably simple. It's an ERC 721 with minor modifications. That's on GitHub. So we do encourage the Web3 community that's looking to bring on more real-world assets into the blockchain to look at the work we've done and sort of use that for what it's worth and expand on it to bring more use cases into the market.
I mean, and I'm guessing like really built here for, I mean, it's funny, Steve's talking pick and shovels, and I didn't realize like this is actually as a software as a service or code as a service behind the scenes, like bigger ticket items. I mean, would it be like a next logical product we see someone selling cars as NFTs?
It's entirely possible, right? Cars, yachts, any kind of real world asset that has intrinsic value associated with it, right? You should be able to put the title of that product into an LLC and tokenize like we've done here. So, art, collectibles, any other kind of expensive luxury items, those are all really good candidates and can easily be, this model can easily be applied to that.
And I think obviously this is reducing a lot of friction in the traditional marketplace. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Roofstock, like their primary demographic or client base is really those that are in investment real estate, right? Rental homes. Am I on the right track there?
That's correct. Yeah, we're exclusively focused on single family rental properties.
I could just see this like years away, probably a few other dots to connect, but things like Turo and like the rental car game. I could see this being for those that are in that investment, or looking into that as like an alternative investment vehicle. This platforms like this could be just a tremendous value add in multiple like adjacent industries, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the best part about this. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're going for. In our case, the real world component has some specificities. For example, a car that's very mobile. If you're going to tokenize that, you need to have some type of way to make sure that you know where the car is and what condition it is. The house, it's immobile. That's an advantage. It makes it easier in some ways, but houses have potentially many more problems than other assets, and so you need to have a way to make sure that you're identifying the proper condition of the house. You're raising all of the issues to the potential buyer's attention. All of those things that have to be true in a real world transaction still have to be true here. And so the hard part of this, when you're thinking about adding the smart contract structure to real world assets, is how do you bridge that and make sure that if I'm buying a tokenized car through an NFT sale on OpenSea, how do I know I'm getting that car? Where is it licensed? All of those things someone will have to think through. But I think people are already working on it, and there's no reason it can't work, right? It's just putting in the time to figure out all this kind of the hairy stuff.
Yeah, the decentralized maxis will roast me here, but I really think this is like a great example of where this idea of like Web 2.5 or somewhat of a centralized organization building these rails on chain that allow for some of the technological advances while still having to deal with some of these in real life things that are just reality, things like the titles. And someone mentioned how do you separate deeds versus securities in regards to each unit, and how the taxes work when it's an LLC. And I think some of this is like I don't want to say it's impossible, but I don't know as if it's feasible to be completely decentralized, fully on chain when we still have these, at least today, this in real life physical framework, whether it's the local or federal municipalities in most jurisdictions.
That's a perfect point, and that is the North Star. We do want this to be a decentralized system. We don't want to be in the middle of this right now. Like with many of the other projects in the DeFi or whatever, they start with a little bit more centralization with a goal towards transitioning away. And the way that you do that is by incentivizing other people to be part of the ecosystem. So, you find some way to create a protocol fee that can pay an inspector or a title company or whatever intermediary you need to perform a service. That's how you structure it. And that's definitely on the roadmap. We don't want to be, the weak point in the chain. This whole thing should exist without us. Of course, we can be one of the counterparties that provides those services, but other people should be as well.
Yeah, I just would echo what Cap said as far as like a whole Web 2.5 idea and being able to use something or create something that I think is going to meaningfully push the world forward in this, because at the end of the day, this is technology, and this is a good technology that has software that we're able to use to better our lives. And I think a lot of people miss that. I think in the trading and the day to day, with at the end of the day, this is weird. I was talking about this a couple of people yesterday. Like, this is really good software that gives the opportunity for people to get more options or do things a little bit differently and be a little more empowered. And I can see that, y'all are doing that. So I guess like a question based on that is that, is this is like obviously continuing to grow. If you had to snap your fingers, obviously software as a service, you talked about different ways you could use it in 10 years. And I know it's a long time frame, so maybe 5 or even a couple. What is your, I hate to use the term roadmap, I don't mean it in the NFT term. Like, what is your roadmap in your mind for this? If you can see like your ideal perfect finished state.
Well, I mean, I can say that if I could snap my fingers, there would be a state where, there's some sort of a decentralized mechanism to vote on governance projects, and then some way to get that implemented decentrally in a decentralized manner. In essence, like, we would probably work ourselves out of a job because the community sort of voting on issues, and those issues get funded then, and those just like any other kind of DAO structure or governance structure. That would be sort of that futuristic state where it's more or less decentralized, and we don't need to do anything anymore to help this along. But in the meantime, we are very interested in building out more DeFi lending options. As I said earlier, like, the process of buying a home in this country, the 3 or 4 weeks it takes to close is extremely stressful for anybody that's bought a home or sold a home. And when you add, lending to that, that's even more stressful. At all times of the day, you're kind of emailing documents to the lender, and they're just asking you for the same documents over and over. And, it's not a very pleasant or delightful experience. And for these rental properties, which are really, it's an asset that has value. And we've already seen like lending projects for NFTs where, based on the floor price, of an ape, it's possible to borrow money against it. Now, of course, these are highly volatile assets, apes and punks and such. But a house is not that volatile. So when you think about it, should be really easy to just pledge your NFT as collateral and borrow up to a limit against it. And so we want to work on streamlining more kind of DeFi lending options. And because it's sort of, I think, the right way to do it. It doesn't make sense to be trying to get a loan in your personal name and spending 3 or 4 weeks with underwriters and then like paying 8.5% or whatever if it's a rental property. We want cheaper, faster, more transparent options to be available to purchasers of these assets. So that's, I think, the next year we'll be spending a lot more time thinking about how to solve those issues. Jeff, anything else from your perspective that I might have missed?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's exactly right. And the other thing I would say in terms of snapping our fingers, what would be truly amazing is if title could be legally recorded on chain. Right now, as we all know, the title to the home has to be recorded in the deed form at a local county's recorder's office. And that can take weeks to get done. It's kind of silly, and there has to be a lot of things have to be true for that to happen. But that's just a convention. There's no kind of universal moral reason that it has to be done that way. You could also have a law that says the ultimate record of ownership for a home is going to be on chain. And if that were to happen, that's a legislative change, of course, and that's at the local level. It could take a long time.
It is local though, right? That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah,
that change would be like a local, like city, state, village level. Am I thinking right?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah.
That's kind of exciting. I mean, it sucks for scale, but for like it happening sooner than later, it doesn't seem that unrealistic.
I think you're right. I mean, some people have tried it. I think Cook County, Illinois, made some moves in that direction. I think Wyoming had a little bit of conversations about that. It hasn't taken off to our knowledge yet, but we know people are thinking about it, and hopefully, now that we've kind of proven that you actually could transact on chain, and people would be willing to do that, maybe that will help spur those conversations forward a little bit. And if that were to happen, then for us, our structure gets a lot easier because you don't have to have the LLC as an intermediary, right? Right now, that LLC is just necessary so that the transaction can be completed in one click, because you're buying the LLC interest. You're not retitling the property at the time of sale. If we had to stop and retitle the property, that's when it would be impossible to have this done in a smart contract format, because we'd have to interrupt the process and go run to the county recorder's office and wait for the deed to get updated. So that kind of, we've just kind of worked around the existing system. But if I could snap my fingers and make those legislative changes, then this would get a lot easier for everyone.
Really interesting. Speaking of the LLC, then, does Roofstock handle all the filings, all the property taxes, and then the I guess whoever owns the stake, or they, once they have ownership? And I guess the follow-up question to that would be, just in my limited research, understand there's somewhat of or maybe it is a soul-bound token, because one of the questions, well, what if I lose my seed phrase of this wallet? Am I out? And as I understand it, that can be deplatformed, and you issue a new soul-bound token to that individual that owns the LLC, or that has been KYC'd and doxed. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to cover the LLC question, and then I can take on the SPT?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the LLC structure is, as I was saying, it's just in place to mediate between the deed and the smart contract, basically. We don't, at the moment, before we sold that house, we did all of the diligence to make sure that taxes had been paid, that the insurance was in place on the property. You don't ever want to leave a property uninsured, all of that stuff we did. Going forward, the token holder is responsible for that. And we're setting up a system to help basically to help notify them of things that they need to do. But ultimately, it's their responsibility. We don't get in the middle of like handling tax payments or impounding, future taxes or anything like that. That would, it would move us a lot closer to centralization, which we don't want. We don't think that's in anyone's interest. Also, requires all kinds of licenses to transmit money and custody money. So that's the way we've set it up. And then when this token holder wants to sell that property, the role that we'll play is in doing the diligence to make sure that owner has paid the taxes, has kept the property insurance current, and all of that, so that we will play this kind of role that green lights the property coming up for sale through our smart contract structure. And that's just to make sure that the next buyer is getting what they think they're getting. But other than that, the responsibility for maintaining the house and making payments and deciding what property manager, or if they want to rent it or what price they want to rent it at, all of those decisions are made by the token holder.
Yeah, and one thing to add about the kind of green lighting a property for sale. Again, we're doing this right now because we just started the program, but ultimately it'll be our hope that service providers get kind of approved on the platform, and then the person that wants to sell their token basically picks one of those approved providers and uses them to go and get the inspection done, and then update all the documents pertaining to taxes, insurance, so on. Because again, as Jeff said, we're now somewhat, very slightly centralized in terms of kind of providing some of these infrastructure services, just because we have a big real estate company backing us, and we can, use them for a lot of this. But over time, we want to move it more towards decentralization and kind of take ourselves out of that equation as much as possible. Coming back to the question on the SPT, because there's an LLC involved, the buyer of the property needs to be doxed. And so the way we do this is people can come to our site and mint a soulbound. It's an ERC 721A, the Azuki standard. And then once you have that SPT, then, and all we've done there is we've kind of modified the transfer function so it cannot be transferred out of the wallet, right? So once you have that SBT, then you can come and get KYC. And we basically have Jumio, which is a provider of KYC services, take care of that. So, we don't just collect documents ourselves and try to do this. So it's a third-party provider, reputable provider. Once the person's KYC'd, and that's as simple as just on your phone, taking a picture of your, front and back of your photo ID and a selfie, and like 30 seconds later, we get a flag that this person's been KYC'd, and then we just go and update the SBT to say this person's a verified buyer. And our smart contract, because even though like when you go to an NFT marketplace, you'll be connecting your wallet anonymously to that marketplace to make the purchase. But the smart contract checks to see if you have an SBT in your wallet and if the status of that SBT is verified buyer. And if that's true, then the sale can take place. So this allows us essentially to keep the architecture permissionless, because if we try to impose KYC restrictions on a marketplace, then ours would be the only marketplace where you could buy these things. And we wanted that to be available across different NFT marketplaces. So we left it permissionless from that perspective, but added this sort of permissioned architecture on top, which just, before you go and do the purchase, you get verified, and then that's added to your SBT, and that's kind of how this transaction takes place. And if you lose your keys and you need to set up a new wallet, obviously we know who you are because you've gone through this process with us before. So we can just drop you a new membership token and then reapply the KYC flag.
And that sort of custodial nature, a lot of people I know in Web3 say, I don't know, I like that for things like this because it's, obviously it's a high value, high important item. So I like having that custodial nature to it, or that maybe not custodial nature isn't the right term, but like, having that ability I think is important, as well as even something you said earlier where it was like you talked about like sending the same information 50 times and being able to make that more automated and verified is something that, we when this happened, we discussed it on the show. And one of the discussion points was, look, like people, if a human error occurs when you're buying or selling a house, even through all those annoying, it's like the biggest purchase of your life has a human error in it. To be able to take that out, I think is really interesting. So I like both of those things within kind of what you said there.
Yeah, the KYC really, it's not even an imposition from us. That's just a legal requirement. In the US, if you own an LLC, we just have to know who you are. So that's, there's no getting around that. But again, we wanted to do this with as little, information about anybody. Like we still want people to have their privacy and anonymity. So all we do is go and update a flag on the SBT that says you're verified, right? That's all the smart contract looks for. We're not trying, it's not like a FICO score or something else that's being put there. So we still, really do value privacy and anonymity from that perspective. And it's just the bare minimal legal requirements that are needed to allow this transaction to take place. And one sort of added advantage of all this is because you need to have that verified buyer flag on your SBT, your kind of home token can actually never be stolen from you in a phishing scam, because somebody would have to come and legitimately get KYC'd to even like perpetrate this kind of a scam. And then even if they did that, we would know exactly who did it, and we can provide that information to the necessary authorities, right? So this is in some ways it's providing more security, because a lot of people ask like, what happens if my token gets stolen? Is my home now gone, right? Of course it's not, because it's you're the owner of an LLC, and that LLC has a home, and these are real world assets. So it can't just disappear because your token was stolen from you, or you lost your seed phrase, or right. So that's the sort of one kind of, I guess, little kind of silver lining to the fact that we do have to get this KYC thing done before you can buy a token.
Yeah, probably worth it to not lose my house. I like that. Let's go down to Loop. Loop, get in here, and then we'll go to James.
Hey, GM, everybody. Yeah, thanks for joining, Sanjay and Jeff. This is super interesting. I have 40 million questions, but I'll try to keep it short.
Bring them.
I guess the first question I have is, what kind of operational cost savings could you get from the the company side on this, and can you kind of pass that over to the seller? So it's like, is that how you're able to get cheaper cost of capital? And what kind of like as a company, is this a good company choice to be able to find things here, pass from the customer, and kind of make that catalyst where like the true definition of a disruptive technology is that it's a clunkier experience at first, but then it's cheaper, and then it's the same quality as the existing technology. And does this kind of fit that category? And what do you kind of see in the future of, like, I guess, finding those savings?
Yeah, so like when you look at an investment property, and let's just take an example of a home in Atlanta, for example. Let's say it's $200,000, right? It's a great asset class to own because it produces rental income. But as soon as you decide you need to sell it and move on to something else, then the costs really start piling up, right? Selling that property would be 6% in commission, so that's $12,000, and then probably 1 to 1.5% in closing costs, so that's another whatever $3,000. So now you're at 15, and so and any opportunity cost associated with staging, doing a little bit of just cleaning and staging. Like once you start adding these costs and the time it takes to get all that done, you're looking at several weeks, and you start getting to close to about 10% of the value of the asset by the time you're done with the sale. So we really wanted to address, the time it takes to sell, the cost associated with it, and just making it a sort of a more transparent experience for the buyer and seller, where you're not like just sitting there, biting your nails, stressed out for 3 weeks trying to figure out if this thing's going to close or some contingency will make the deal fall off. So when this property sold through the Seaport smart contract on the Origin marketplace, the total fee paid by the seller was 3%. So already, that's cost savings from the seller's perspective. From the buyer's perspective, it was a much more streamlined experience. Again, you're not waiting for weeks to close on the transaction, and which is actually delightful for both the buyer and seller. But also for the buyer, what was really critical here was access to on-chain DeFi lending. And this particular deal, it was a 65% LTV interest-only loan at 6%, right? And if you look at borrowing for an investment property that's in an LLC in the TradFi world, my guess is right now you're looking at hard money rates north of 8.5%, 9%, right? And those would be you might get those as interest only, or sometimes the only choice you have is amortizing loans. And so we want our, again, this was an example where the borrower got a better financial outcome, or the buyer got a better financial outcome through the loan product, and the seller got a better financial outcome through the fees they paid. And we think Web3 can deliver that because largely a lot of the sale and settlement is happening with a combination of a smart contract and programmable money like USDC. You don't need any intermediaries. You don't need 8 people sitting across a table passing documents and signing for a couple hours, right? And the same thing on the lending side. If you can avoid all the traditional intermediaries involved in a lending process and simplify that largely with DeFi, that a lot of those savings basically just get passed on essentially to the seller and the buyer. And we're going to keep innovating in those areas more, so we have more DeFi lending options where the buyer of the property has a menu of choices and they can pick and choose the right lending option for their needs, right? Like if you're a fix and flip buyer, then you just need a lending product for a few months or a year, because you're basically going to buy the property, use the loan to do your rehab work, and then you want to sell the asset and get out. So you don't need a 30-year loan for that process. And if you're sort of an investment buyer with a 5-year horizon, then maybe you get a 2 or 3 year loan and see if you can refinance it out after that. And when you're ready to exit, you pay that off and get out, right? So we want to come out with an array of these kind of lending choices that are more flexible in terms of the what they're offering, but also cheaper than TradFi options. Jeff, anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, just keying off of the rule of thumb that you mentioned about what are the hallmarks of a transformative technology. The other one that I hear a lot is the VC rule of thumb. Is this 10 times better than the existing solution? Because if not, people probably won't be bothered. I would argue this is 10 times better. I mean, we have the savings and costs that Sanjay mentioned, and it's truly a delightful experience to buy that, to complete that transaction in one click. It doesn't. It's kind of like analogous to Amazon Prime. You know, you might spend days or weeks deciding which electronics product you want to purchase and doing all of your research and all of that. But when you decide, you just want it delivered now, right? You don't want to wait 4 weeks for it to arrive. That's the same thing here. So you still have to do all your diligence. You still have it's a real world home. But once you've made that decision, like, why go through a 4 or 8 week process? Instead, you could just do it, you know, with one click. So that's the way. I think there are definitely some ways that we can improve the transaction. As you said, like maybe some clunkiness, and definitely a lot of education that has to be done here to get people interested. But we would argue that the level of education that's required is it's worth it for what you get back as a buyer and then as a future seller.
That's really awesome. Yeah, thanks for the answer.
Very cool. Let's run to James, and then I know we're around the top of the hour and may wind down. But as people have questions, obviously feel free to pop up. But James, go ahead and get in here.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop down, but I did want to say before I left, Jeff, Sanjay, this is the reason why I got into Web3, with seeing things that the technology should and could do in the future, and hoping that companies like yours would come along and really disrupt industries that needed disruption. And I honestly couldn't give you bigger kudos in terms of what Steve was mentioning before, like infrastructure. You know, sometimes people don't look at these things as the sexiest opportunities, but just like lithium, right? Like you can invest in Tesla, which is popular, but if you invest in lithium, you're probably long term in a better position. I think companies like yours are very similar to that. So I just think that yeah, I'm giving you massive amount of kudos here to what you did. Being first movers in the space isn't easy, so I look forward to seeing more.
Thank you.
Thanks
That's
so much, man.
so heartening to hear. And I love the Tesla example, because when you're long on Tesla, you're long on one company, but when you're long on lithium, you're long on the entire EV space. So love that analogy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Luke, go ahead and pop back in.
I had another question. So I'm trying to think, like, you know, I'm thinking of my parents buying a house, right? And they're, you know, if I have, well, I use a pudgy penguin as an example, so then you're close to that. If I have my pudgy penguin, you know, let's say it runs to 100 ETH, and I'm keeping that on my ledger. I'm very well versed in how to keep that safe, keep my seed phrase safe. But from my parents' perspective, you know, they would have no idea. And I think they would have a lot of worry of, oh, my house deed is, you know, in this little USB stick, right? Is there, what is your, you know, I think my parents don't want to be kind of solely responsible for their security. They want the house deed to you know, essentially not ever be stolen, because if it is, you know, it's just, you know, you can rely on kind of like state government and, you know, whether it's a bank or whatnot to kind of ensure that. But is there a way where do you guys see a future where you will kind of help solve this issue for, you know, people that are older and are just never going to use the blockchain, because, you know, as you get older, you tend to not change your mind ever, or, you know, adopt new things. So is there a future where you kind of see yourself solving that issue? Because, you know, I think that would be a big issue and a big hindrance for somebody wanting to use the method. And I kind of look at Reddit as a great recent example where they onboarded people in Web3 without them even knowing, called, you know, digital collectible. And, you know, now literally I saw something this morning that was like, I returned my digital collectible like